everyone, Lore Master of Sotek here with easily the most special episode of Lorebeards that we have had and probably ever will have. So, we somehow got permission to get to sit down and have a chat with the one and only Andy Hall, the lead man behind all of the amazing lore and stories that we've seen cropping up for Total War Warhammer and kind of tying an impossible amount of different editions and lore together into one cohesive game, which is an impossible task, and yet he's somehow been managing it all these years. And we're kind of going into the magnum opus of Total War Warhammer 3, but we have the opportunity here to sit down with him and talk a lot about Cathay, and that's what we're going to be doing today. So we're not going to waste any time. Nathan, do you just want to just take us in?
It's kind of weird doing this not live, you know? But
don't break the illusion.
So yeah,
actually,
yeah, go ahead.
I think probably important to give your viewers maybe a bit of context of why we're doing it this way, why I'm talking to you guys, and that's because obviously every Warhammer race up until this point, well, less of the Vampire Code, has had an army book, and you guys as consumers and viewers have been able to pore over those army books and kind of get in your heads what may or may not come and speculate, etc. But obviously Cathay is a bit of a special case. So we've done a couple of digestible articles for people on the blogs. You know, people that probably aren't following it as close as some other people want to, or if I was a player, I would want to. And I think what we're going to do today is we have an opportunity to really get into the weeds of the lore. You know, the lore's been written by Games Workshop. I have the army book before me here, mainly in my head, but there will be times when I'll be having to look through the pages. And this will be an opportunity to do a real kind of deep dive for players who want to spend hour, 2 hours with us and just talk kind of lore non-stop. So I think it's important to kind of explain why we're doing this, and that's kind of why, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's great, and an excellent kind of set down there. But that does kind of lead into easily the most important question we have, which is how much do we have to pay you to give us that book?
like Sotek and I have a spare kidney each, right?
Yeah, no, there is no price. I like being able to pay the mortgage to my house. So yeah, I'm at home, by the way, and obviously not the studio. This is where I've been working for the past year. I have recently started going back into the studio actually.
Oh, cool.
And so it's been good to start, seeing friends not on the computer screen.
That's good.
But
being trapped purely at home is it's a lot. Well, hopefully, maybe Games Workshop will go crazy and sell that as a PDF or something. I would buy that so fast.
I would pay lots of money. Like the tabletop guy in me really wants to see those rules. Obviously, we'll see a translation of it eventually when the army gets released. But Sotek and I, we started what, 5th edition? You started?
Yeah. So just another army in 8th is like,
oh, make me feel old.
It's amazing.
2nd edition.
I don't think we were alive yet.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's an important point. When we talked to Games Workshop about doing this, they literally wrote us a really cool army book. There is rules in here and how to play with this fort in 8th edition, and that's really important actually, because that's how we've been designing our factions. We've been taking the 8th edition army books, and the key is on the 8th edition, and bringing that and converting that, and that's kind of been my job along with the designers like Jim Whitston and Ian, our game director, and Rich Aldridge, who runs the DLC team. All these guys have been working with since 2014, and taking that army book and turning it into a Total War kind of force faction campaign side and battle side. And so that's kind of what we've been able to do here with Cathay.
That's incredible.
Awesome.
That's
All right, are we ready to get into some lore?
Yeah.
So yeah. Should be.
Do it. Let's do it. Nathan, why don't you take us in with a first question?
Yeah, actually, this kind of links up to what you've said. Is the Total War series mostly follows 8th edition in terms of timeline for Warhammer Fantasy Battles, dabbling in some older editions, and obviously we've seen some creative input from yourselves, such as Repans and so on, bringing her forward in the timeline. Would it be safe to assume then that Cathayan lore that we'll see will be the stuff that we see from older editions and obviously Old World too, because it looks like because sometimes obviously you do have a bit of a mix.
Yeah. For a start, I can't talk about Games Workshop plans for the old world. I don't know, and B, I probably wouldn't be able to. I will leave that firmly with the guys in Nottingham. Secondly, this is definitely kind of 8th edition. The actual date we're definitely going to keep close to our chest for now, for reasons that may become apparent later on. But I think what's more interesting when we started talking with Workshop about this is we wanted to get Cathay up to the 8th edition standard pretty fast, straight out the gate. I mentioned this in one of the earlier blogs. Is that obviously the Empire, for instance, has been constantly evolving and iterating on for 20, 25 years. And one of the goals was to get Cathay, not just its first army book, but to, in our heads, have already had all those iterations and bring it up to that 8th edition standard, because that's what Total War Warhammer is based on. It's 8th edition Warhammer from the get-go. I think we've been reasonably successful. Think about the timeline is certainly in that period. Karl Franz is alive. In that 2500 plus period. But I'm not going to be nailed exactly what year that is. I don't think it matters, to be honest.
Yeah, no, it's just more because obviously there were bits of lore throughout almost every single edition, and to see it now being shaped, obviously we've seen that first trailer, and it is more or less what fans, especially old school Warhammer Fantasy fans, expected in terms of visually and so on. But to see it brought to life is kind of wow, you know what I mean?
I would say if I was, the other side of the fence, if I wasn't lucky enough to be working at Games Workshop, my head would be going at the moment. I think in a roundabout way, you're asking if like the existing lore previously that kind of mentioned Cathay is that still relevant? Is it being overwritten? Games Workshop does that all the time. And the latest army book or codex is what's meant to have is always a canon rewrite. Not always, actually. Sometimes they acknowledge previous things. And I think actually there's a bit here I might mention that I think Owen Brannan, Owen, one of the writers of the book, mentions. He was talking about earlier texts refer. This is talking about like the Celestial Dragon Emperor. So earlier texts refer to him as En Hyong, while later accounts adopt the name Emperor Wu as East. But that is a miscommunication between the kind of the old world scholars, not understanding or even having the concept of it's the same emperor, because Emperor Wu is an Eastern term for a magical lord. So
called it. Called it.
Yeah. So kind of stuff has already been addressed. We're not just saying, Emperor Wu doesn't exist. It's just that the Eastern scholars didn't quite get it right. Which, you know, there's plenty of historical precedents where that stuff happens all the bloody time, or did happen. It's frequently used by transfer state with it. Oh, well, there's difficulty in remembering the name of a creature who's effectively ruled the largest human empire in the world for at least 5,000 years, you see.
Awesome.
So, you know.
All right.
That's great.
That kind of
maybe. Thank you. That's perfect. That is exactly that's great. So I got a question, which is so a character I'm really curious to hear more about. If you can tell us more about her, because she's been name dropped, but we don't have a lot of specifics on her. Is the Moon Empress? It seems implied that she also is a dragon that is kind of on par with the Celestial Dragon Emperor. But being called the Moon Empress, does she have any connection with Manslib, the true moon, the one that's always been there, as one of these primordial ancients? Or what is it that her title specifically refers to?
So she's Queen Yang, the Moon Dragon, Empress of the Grand Cathay, Mistress of the Ancestral Realms, Commander of the Imperial Agents, and Master of the Moon Winds. So she's very much Yin, where the Celestial Dragon and Zhen Yang, that's his name, is Yang magic, but the Moon Empress represents Yin magic. So it's almost like day and night. So she kind of controls the agents of the world. You know, all the ambassadors of Cathay will answer to her. She has her own spy networks. She very much works in the shadows, in the darkness, but don't mistake that for her being evil. She's certainly not. And yeah, they are, her and her husband, the Dragon Emperor, are kind of older than the Cathay itself as well. And I think I've seen a couple of kind of people referring to, well, how actually old is Cathay? And it's like, well, we don't know the exact age. We just know that those two were walking around that area of what the Warhammer world for a long time before you know, even there was an official empire. Is they were kind of ruling the tribes and stuff. And at some point, you know, that they got to the point where they became known as the Emperor and Empress, and almost formalized Cathay. But they've been around, as we've kind of said in the past, you know, before the old ones, and especially around that area, they've laid claim to it long before.
Awesome. Great. That's wonderful. That is perfect. Awesome. Nathan.
Cool. So I think it's worth probably mentioning, you know, about the Dragon children, because that is obviously a big part of
that is another question we had. Yep. We'd love to know more about them.
I'm sure you would. I'm sure you would. Well, I mean, there's 9 Dragon children.
Oh, okay. So there's 9 specifically. 9.
Yes, there is very specifically 9 Dragon children. Now, 4 of them have been, as I like to term it, have been lost to time and antipathy as well. So we don't know what's happened to 4 of them. But there are 5 active who are effectively ruling Cathay. So you know about 2. We talked about those, and then we have the Jade Emperor. Jade Dragon, who basically rules Central Cathay, and he's very much an administrator. He's trusted by all the Dragon children, and he kind of, you know, makes sure all the edicts from the Dragon Emperor himself go out, and he kind of keeps everyone in order. He so the other Dragon children kind of think of he's a bit boring but reliable.
Yeah.
And then going south, we have the Fire Dragon. And he looks after that border between Ind and Khuresh. He's very fiery tempered, you know, fire is the thing. And he's a bit miffed that Ying kind of gets all the glory of defending the Great Bastion, where he's like, he's got a really hard job defending the southern border.
Oh, I'm sure he does.
Because there's the mountains of heaven in the south as well, and that's where the someone else lives at the moment. Someone else.
Yeah, someone we may speak about later.
And then to the east is Yin Yin, who is the sea dragon. So she's the ruler of the eastern provinces, and she rules and is the admiral of the Grand Dragon Fleet, who go into the Jade Sea. And she's really interesting actually, because she's the one. She's kind of expansionist. She's the one. She tried an invasion of the Southlands that failed. Got very admonished.
Nice. I'm glad we're keeping that story.
Yeah, absolutely. So I kind of like her. I want to see more of her. Whether we will or not is unconfirmed.
So we've got black in the north, silver or white to the west, red to the south, jade in the center. And do we know what color the East Dragon is?
I think she's more blue actually.
Blue or azure?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
I got my last little thing about the dragons, the dragon children specifically. Can you tell? So I assume they all can turn into humans.
Yeah.
Yeah. So my last two questions about them are: A, when they are human, is it like everybody instantly knows who they are? Like, we've noticed that Zhao Ming and Miao Ying have the whited out eyes, and it seems like they stick out pretty obviously when they're in human form. Can they stealth among the people of Cathay, or does everyone just kind of instantly know that one of the dragons is around?
I think certainly you can tell, and I don't think they're trying to hide that fact. That they are the rulers of these provinces, so I think they go into human form almost to be able to communicate and converse and move around the people and sit in the palaces. Actually, sit in the palaces and order their subjects. But they are all capable shapeshifters. So if they wanted to, go into the general populace as like a beggar woman or whatever I'm sure they could. Kind of like Michael Jackson used to do. He used to go incognito, didn't he?
So they're not strictly limited to like a single human form. They can actually change it.
I don't think I don't think they can go. Oh, I'm going to change into that table, or change.
Okay, so like minor edits to a human form.
I would imagine so. I think their standard kind of human form is what they spend a lot of their time in. But if they wanted to use a bit of their magic, and don't forget these are all highly capable beings.
Yeah.
They could definitely do that, especially the ones favoured by the Moon Empress, who that's kind of a whole deal. She certainly goes around the empire in disguise, talking to people.
Oh, great! And
cool.
Then my last question regarding the kiddos is, at least for now, is do we know vaguely how old they are? Are we dealing with like they've been around for centuries, or they've been around for like thousands of years? Do we have a ballpark of what their ages are?
Thousands. Obviously, they're not as old as the Emperor and Empress, but they've certainly been about for thousands of years. Certainly beyond the ken of any kind of modern humans. They'll have always known that these these beings have ruled them.
Okay, so they predate Cathay as well.
I think I'm not sure they predate it. I think they're certainly probably weren't about when the old ones were still knocking around, but they're probably certainly older than some of the oldest kind of.
Awesome. So they're kind of there with like the star dragons of the high elves, age-wise.
Yeah, definitely. These are ancient, powerful beings, even the children.
Awesome. That's good to know.
All right.
Nathan, what you got?
I want to go back to something that you mentioned. Obviously, as the Eastern Dragon is an expansionist. Now, older Cathayan lore kind of suggested them to be fairly isolationist. This is obviously being, like, we know that Cathay is being rewritten and so on. So, is it safe to say that Cathay, as a empire, has possibly expanded like other human nations have done into separate locations? Like, for example, we got New World colonies and so on. We have to keep in mind that obviously they are still human, and humans love to explore.
They are, but they are still, in general, an isolationist nation.
Right.
But that nation itself is big. It's massive,
Yeah.
and it contains many peoples and cultures within itself. And the emperor has not really had any need or a desire to expand, west or something. In fact, he put the Great Maw in there to punish the ogres and stuff. He created that desolate wasteland, and he didn't want to go for that. I mean, there are outliers, like we just mentioned, Yin, who feels that they should be. But the book kind of, they talk about the fact that with times are starting to change in the 2500 era, and what has been gone before, with the crowning of an ever chosen, means the status quo is starting to change, and maybe the emperor is feeling that there is a need to expand, maybe even expand north.
Cool.
Awesome. Yeah, that's great. A question I had about the dragons. I've gotten this question a lot from people, and I'm curious about it as well. So, obviously, most of the older lore is written very specifically from the perspective of the West. And one of the things we have is we do have, quite a bit of lore on dragons, but one thing that people ask is, are the Cathayan dragons kind of their own dramatically different species? For instance, the lore in like 6th edition and in the Storm of Magic in 8th edition says that like how Galanos the Black is the father of all dragons. Like he's Big Daddy of all dragons. Is he the Celestial Dragon Emperor and the Moon Empress's dad? Or are they a complete offshoot, like a different species?
I think they're as old as them, but I don't think they come from the same sire. I think they are definitely a slight offshoot. You could see that in their physical appearance.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, we're taking inspiration from Eastern influences, the more serpentine, which suggests they're a slightly different species. And you also got to put into the Warhammer, self effectuating kind of, boasting. I'm the father of all dragons. Yeah, yes, of course you are.
Yeah.
But I think what makes these dragons very different is not necessarily their physical or their genetics, is their attitude. And they look down upon the Western dragons. They can't believe they're being ridden. They're like, you let people ride you? Ugh! They would never. It's inconceivable to the dragons of Cathay to be ridden. That's that. But to them, that's almost like the greatest insult. And I think that, interestingly, that, and this isn't in the book. This has come from a discussion I had with Andy Hall, Mark Bedford, about this at GWHQ. That that would probably proliferate down into the people of Cathay. So they'll look at the high elves who are very haughty and look at us kind of thing, and they go, But you ride dragons.
Oh man, it's like that's when the dragons that hate the high elves are the ones that honestly are the most like them.
Warhammer in it.
Yeah, that's perfect.
Oh, I love that lore. You get these little intricacies.
Yeah, that's great. So it would be pretty safe to say, it sounds like, that all the lore we've had about dragons should basically be like have a tab that says Western dragons as opposed to just dragons.
Yeah, I think so. I think Western. We're saying that from for ease of reference. I don't think there's a canonical distinction within the world from if you were looking into that world or
right.
as part of that world.
Or like non-Cathayan.
Yeah,
Running.
Exactly. And I don't think any other dragons other than the Cathayan Dragons, certainly none we know about yet, can obviously transmute into a different form like these dragons can.
Awesome. Very exciting. Thank you.
Talking about disdain, I think it's an interesting point. The Celestial Dragon Emperor has a very much similar disdain to the gods themselves. Now, and this may have been a little bit of my own doing in one of the early Bloods. Let's clarify that Cathay Dragons aren't gods. They're not gods. And they don't see themselves as gods and don't even want to be seen as gods. They're revered, not worshipped. They're revered all the same. But they have a disdain for gods because they're older than the gods in many cases. In that kind of Warhammer lore thing that gods exist through belief. That Cathayan dragons existed before there was kind of mortals to generate that belief and create the gods.
Right.
So they're not gods, and in many cases they're not as powerful as gods. Certainly not as powerful as gods. But they don't hold much shift with gods at all, and therefore the Cathayans themselves don't.
I love that. Shift. I love that.
The difference is ancestor worship. They do worship their ancestors.
Okay.
And the villages of Cathay have kind of temples and shrines to their ancestors.
Nathan, I think that could lead into one of the questions you had about, this.
Well, I've actually got something to ask about the dragons themselves first, because obviously we've talked about the Dragon Emperor and his family and so on, but we're talking about Cathayan dragons like if they're a separate subspecies in a sense. Is it safe to say that there are more Cathayan dragons out there?
I don't think so. I think there's about, not that we know of. I think there's 11.
I have
non-children, two parents, 4 of which are missing.
So I have a potentially stupid question, but if it turned out to be true, I think it'd be cool. Is there any evidence to suggest that so according to the Archaon stories, the dragon he fought to get the Eye of Shirian is said to be a dragon from the east, and it's shaped like a Cathayan dragon. I don't remember his actual name, but in the west they call him Flame Fang, which isn't his real name. He has like a Cathayan name. Is that perhaps a corrupted one of the children, or a Cathayan dragon that went bad? Oh, your mic cut out.
Did it? I don't know. That's definitely a no comment from me. Okay. I'm not into that one.
I'm gonna slot that under plausible.
I think it's plausible. I think there's very much a reason that Andy Hall. Sometimes me and Andy get confused together because I'm Andy Hall, Hall, and he's Andy Hall, Hoare. I think there's very much a reason why there are unaccounted for Cathayan dragons, dragon children.
I'm slotting that under headcanon. Not even plausible. That's going straight to headcanon.
That's fine, but that's not me. It's that's you.
Yes, that's me. Yeah. So another question. I don't know if you'll be able to answer this one yet, because I almost feel like y'all are kind of building up to the details on this. But in the conversations about the Celestial Dragon Emperor and the Moon Empress, in one of the articles, we got a note that they vanished for about 400 years. Can you tell us anything about that? Like, when in the timeline they vanished for 400 years? Was this like during the Great War?
Time of Darkness and Disharmony. It's kind of a very known part of Cathayan history. I say known, obviously you guys don't know, but it's there in the Cathayan history. So it was about 400 to 500 years ago, and they disappeared for a reason that they haven't really said. And in that time, yeah, the Monkey King managed to take over great parts of Cathay, while the Dragon Children just basically started fighting each other.
So, was it they vanished 500 years ago and only got back a century ago? Or was it they got back 500 years
ago? So, in 1999, I can give you an exact date.
Oh, awesome. I love exact dates.
The Dragon Emperor and Empress mysteriously vanished, leaving Grand Cathay without its rulers. The period of Cathay's history becomes known as the Time of Darkness and Disharmony. And then in that intervening period, the Dragon Emperor's children bicker and fight amongst themselves, while the Monkey King uses the confusion to seize new territories, and Grand Cathay is divided like no time in its history. And then in the Monkey King seizes power and installs the warlord Kashyyyk of Clan Eshin as his advisor. Begins trade with the Skaven. And then that finally kicks the Dragon Children's asses into gear.
Right, cool.
How it's written.
Oh, that's so exciting! Oh my god!
That's good.
And unite to oppose this upstart Monkey Emperor. And then the Celestial in 2380. There you go, an exact date. What an exact year. The Celestial Dragon and Moon Dragon return, casting the Monkey King down from his throne.
Ooh, that's really interesting.
Why they went away for that period, who knows?
I have some theories, but I'll save that for another time. I don't think you'll be able to answer those for me.
So, I mean, what I do know, and it's something I'm not going to share with you guys today, which is that the Celestial Dragon Emperor and the Empress, they are working towards something. Yeah, they are. There is a plan in place. They're trying to do something. Whether that's for the good of Cathay or who knows? I mean, dragons thinking, they're almost immortal beings. They think in a different way to us. So
hopefully they learn from the mistakes of the old ones.
Hopefully, or they don't particularly like the old ones because the old ones buggered it up for them. Excuse the French.
Understandably.
Understandably. Their world was how that's why there was dragons on the world before anything else. It was the planet was in their effectively their Goldilocks zone, and it was the old ones that moved it closer, and then effectively put all dragons to sleep or made them sleepier, and it was only the most powerful dragons that were able to withstand that. Of course, Celestial Dragon being one, and the Moon Empress. That's probably why you found the Moon Empress. She was one of the few dragons that could withstand that planetary shift.
Yeah, I think one of the things I love so much about the Cathay trailer was that kind of snippy line Miao Ying opens with that seems to be very clearly referencing the old ones and how they, if it weren't for the old ones, chaos wouldn't be on the planet. So
no, and the dragons would be, the dominant species.
Cool.
So. And again, the people she served are there because of the old ones. So, is she endeared to them? Don't know. They certainly serve and revere her. But she may even treat them like we treat mayflies, or or goldfish, or pets with very short lives.
It is interesting because the blog has shown two different personalities so far from the two legendary lords shown. Sure. Everyone's really put Zhao as they've affectionately started calling him Dragon Bro.
Yeah, is there any truth behind behind that, a lot of people are seeming to equate Zhao Ming with almost like an Uncle Iroh type character from Avatar, or a much more humble and personable dragon.
He's certainly personable. I can't say I was inspired by Uncle Iroh because I've never seen Avatar. So, I think I've caught the occasional episode, but it's certainly not something I was inspired by. But again, Warhammer plays with these archetypes all the time. And yeah, it's like I said in the blog, I think he will share japes and talk to his subjects, and probably does beloved them a bit more than Mei Ying does. And so maybe there is a true affection there, and yeah, and he will, like I say, share a joke, have a drink with them, and so I think that's a fair assumption.
That's super interesting.
I mean,
go ahead.
I was about to say, I mean, personally, I hope that's the case, because obviously, like I've worked in a few different jobs, and obviously you tend to respect the leader more, who's willing to come down to have a drink with you, and it inspires loyalty, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. Now, whether he's doing that consciously, because he thinks his subjects will perform better, whether he's doing it to spite the other dragons because they don't like it. Mei Ying's cold and aloof. I don't know whether you know that.
Yeah, we have read about that. Yeah.
That's certainly within his bounds. Again, you're trying to portray someone that's lived for thousands of years, and so actually it's interesting that he does treat us as probably a benevolent boss would. So that in itself is interesting, that this creature that's lived for so long, to him, people, it'd be like you taking an interest, like saying a fly, and oh, you're right, little fly and stuff. And that would be weird, wouldn't it? So that's almost how the dragons think about it. It's like, why is he taking interest? Now, I don't want this to tip the other way, because I think it makes it quite clear in the book, and certainly the work we've done in Warhammer 3, that dragons are largely benevolent, creatures. They do care about the Empire of Cathay. They want it and its subjects to remain safe. We wanted, when we were doing the makeup of the game, we wanted a hero race. Got to. Because people like to play the good guys, and so Cathay is an order faction.
Oh yeah, you need some order to balance out all those demons. so many demons.
Exactly. Now, is as with all Warhammer, is there a bit, once you pickle the scab away, is there some slightly unsavory aspects? There certainly is, but those will come as people play the game and read the lore that's in there, and as and when Games Workshop comes and looks at Cathay, you'll start to see that more and more. But obviously, for a start, we're still 2-3 weeks into introducing this faction. We obviously want to give you almost like the tourist pamphlet of Cathay.
And we're loving it.
Nation in the world, protectors of the East. But yeah, that depth is certainly there in Cathay.
It sounds really interesting.
Yeah. So we kind of touched on him earlier. So I think we might as well dive into him. A character that's been kind of popping up more and more, and a lot of people are super excited to see that he's still part of the universe, is the Monkey King. Is there you mentioned that he seems to have either an alliance or some kind of positive relationship with Clan Eshin. Is there any other information you could tell us about the Monkey King, and that, like, where does he initially come from? Is he the one that taught Clan Eshin all of their little secrets that they took back with them to the West? Anything like that?
I don't know about no. I think Clan Eshin have been more inspired by the humans around them. To be honest, I mean, I don't know whether there's an established connection with Clan Eshin other than obviously what we've just talked about. So there's certainly hinted at maybe there's an ongoing relationship. So the Monkey King, he basically lives in the south, in the mountains of heaven, which is a big area, which is like I suppose like it would be like the equivalent of the Pyrenees. This mountain chain, but it's Warhammer, so everything's bigger.
Right.
That kind of separates kind of Ind from Cathay. So it's a massive area, which is technically part in Cathay and technically part in Ind. But that is where the Monkey King resides, and the Monkey Warriors as well. And there's a great many Monkey Warriors. They're probably the second most populous creature, other than humans in Cathay. And they have been known to fight in the armies of Cathay, much like other, whether it's warrior monks or other kind of tribes and peoples, because Cathay is so vast. And all this, obviously, we can't get to in the first go.
Yeah. Do you have a name?
Does he have a name?
Or is he just the Monkey King?
He's just the Monkey King at the moment. At the moment.
Okay.
But he's there. He's he's not very popular with the dragons, for obvious reasons. And again, sometimes these things slip out. And Li Dao, who is the fire dragon, ruler of the southern provinces and the mountains of heaven. So technically, he rules the mountains of heaven, where the Monkey King is. He's master of the burning winds and lord of the phoenix. So the Monkey King is a constant thorn in the side of the fire dragon, and the two are often at odds. This amuses the Monkey King, especially as the fire dragon must often call upon his monkey warriors to defend the southern provinces of the empire from Ind and the Nagas of Khuresh. So.
Oh, he said the thing. He said the thing.
He said the thing.
He said the thing.
And that's all I'm going to say about that thing.
Just that you said it. That's gonna power me through many days.
A lot of people, when they see this video, are gonna go wild.
So it sounds like the Monkey King is he's not necessarily by any means evil. He sounds like he's more of an annoying trickster that's very arrogant, if anything.
Which would fall into a historical archetype. I think he's a bit more malign than that. However, clearly the dragons haven't got to the point where they've just gone in and just, purged the area. Which suggests to me that they almost put up with him for reasons that it's probably border security. It's probably the lesser of two evils. Having the Monkey King in the mountains of heaven means that it's probably safer than purging that area and then having Ind or Khuresh just trawls through.
So would it, and I mean this purely from a lore perspective, not like fishing for anything. Would it be kind of safe to say that he almost kind of has a relationship with Cathay, kind of like Archon the Black does with the Tomb Kings, where they don't really like each other by any means, but they kind of tolerate the existence of one another?
Yeah, I think that's fair to say.
Awesome.
I like that, yeah.
At the moment.
Literally, a lot of this stuff is in the book.
I'm sure strange alliances and relationships could be happening since the world's catching on fire.
Absolutely.
Nathan, you got anything?
Yeah, so just a minor question. Obviously, we know that Cathay has had some issues with Khuresh and Ind and so on. Is it safe to say they've also had issues with any possible nations to further east?
Yeah, yes, they have, and that's where the Jade Sea is, and the Grand Dragon fleets are of the. Did I say the Sea Dragon? I forgot. See, it always pops in and pops out my head.
Mm.
Yeah, but the Sea Dragon, of course, the Sea Dragon. And that's kind of what she's there for, and she defends that eastern coast, and almost proactively goes out to sea with these dragon fleets, to sink pirates. Definitely, they've had issues with the Dark Elves along there, and there's other human nations. I'm not going to name that they've had issues with. But on the flip side, it's also where Fu Chao is, and Fu Chao is like the eastern version of Shenyang. It's a massive cosmopolitan city, full of different ghettos of different races.
That actually
may even be the most cosmopolitan city in the world.
That actually leads in really nicely, or segues into our next question. So we've gotten a little bit on a couple of cities. Like, we know Nangao, we're learning more about it. The City of Smoke, we're all like the super. It's kind of almost sounds like the Nuln of Cathay. It's where all the war machines are made, and you have all these master artificers that live there and stuff. So are there any other cities that are like really important? And if there are, could you tell us like if they have any like fancy titles, like how Nangao is the City of Smoke, or they the City of X, and what they provide for Cathay? What makes them so special? Are there any highlights?
Yeah, there is loads of highlights actually. So again, this Fu Chao we just mentioned is in the east. That's the palace of the Sea Dragon is there, and it's extremely cosmopolitan city.
Is it a port?
It's a port. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
awesome.
absolutely. And yeah, there's so there's the city of Beichai, which again is in the east, and that's that's got a really dark reputation. That's a place where the cults of Qianqi are constantly kind of sprouting up, and no matter how many times they kind of, strike it down or burn the leaves, the root seems to remain.
What was its name?
Pardon?
What was its name? The Tzeentch city?
Beichai.
Ah, cool.
So
That's old lore.
Chai.
That's old lore. Awesome.
There you go. Yeah, there you go. It's a magnet for secret worship of the dark gods. So in recent times, the cult of the painted skin has grown in size and strength within the region, believed by the Cathayans to be a splinter cabal of Qianqi. That may represent another of the dark gods at last finding a foothold of the empire. So, and that kind of we'll go back to all the city stuff, but I think that's a big kind of meta point in that chaos. And probably one of the reasons that Cathay has endured for so long is chaos has always struggled to actually take hold in Cathay. And the three of the gods are just batching against that Great Bastion. But there is the notable exception, which is Tzeentch, who have a special name by the Cathayans because they have to deal with them so much, and the Moon Empress takes and her agents take a very special interest in the cults of Qianqi, and she will send her many-eyed crowmen out to find them, and it will be the agents of the Empress who kind of try and root out these cults. And to me, if I was available enough to write Black Library novels, that'd be what I'd be pitching at the moment. I want to pitch a Cathayan agent rooting out Qianqi cults in one of these cool cities of Cathay. I think that would be a great novel.
Is that their like? Is that almost kind of like their sword masters of Hoeth or their witch hunters of Sigmar? What were the many-eyed crows?
Well, no, I didn't say it was them. The many-eyed crowmen or the Jade crowmen are, no, the Onks crowmen, sorry, of the Empress.
Oh, those sound scary.
Yeah, yeah, and they are, and they look scary. Mark Badford's shown me sketches of them. They look really scary. But they work for the Empress.
Hmm.
Oh, do they? They do. They do. They work for an Empress, and and you can imagine going around Cathay and you see this murder of, as in collective noun, of crowmen flying across, and you'd be like, "Well, they're off somewhere."
That's really interesting. Could you tell us anything about the Celestial City that is apparently floating above Weijin? If I understood it correctly.
Yeah. So the Celestial City is home to the Celestial Court, which is above Weijing, kind of floats there, and that is where the Dragon Emperor and Empress kind of reside. It's where they receive guests, kind of dignitaries, and obviously the higher echelons of Cathayan servants and society will maybe go once in a lifetime, kind of thing, to see them, and it's also where the Wu Xing compass kind of resides. It's kind of etched on the floor of the celestial court, and it kind of moves, and that's how the Dragon Emperor kind of can direct kind of the elements of magic, and it's the elements of magic is what Cathayans kind of call the winds of magic. So they like the rest of the human world, understand magic comes in kind of eight winds or elements, and they're engraved on the Wu Xing compass, and he uses that to direct. When the magic's in harmony, he can direct that magic, maybe toward the bastion to kind of imbue the bastion when it needs to be, or even to the Great Dragon River, which is the river where the bastion stops. That's where the river continues that border, and that river is really interesting actually, because that's where some are rumored where one of the missing dragon children lies underneath that river. And to cross that river is to lose your soul, because it's also in Cathayan lore the gateway to the underworld.
Oh my!
Kind of enemy forces, or chaos tribesmen like the Hung or the Kurgan that have tried to cross that river, they just they go in and never come out again.
Oh my god! Okay.
You almost see their souls leaving their bodies.
That's cool.
Wow, nice. That's a very nice natural border to have.
It is, and effectively they built the Great Bastion between that and effectively the highest parts of the mountains and more, to kind of create that northern.
That's awesome. That is super awesome.
So he directs this magic to basically like empower one of these locations to make it like even more formidable than it even normally is.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so this has got to lead into, can you tell us anything about what the deal is with the lore of yin and yang?
Yeah.
Like what are they versus like, the regular battle lores?
So there is the laws of yin and yang, and they are wielded by the dragon-blooded Shugengan. And the Shugengan are said to be, or are, can't remember if it's said to be, or are the ancestors of as the dragon children were born, they had, they took mates of their own, but human mates, and created a kind of a race of dragon-blooded humans, of which the most powerful are the Shugengens, who are offered, and obviously as they then had their own children and ancestors. So you almost have the dragons at the top of this echelon, and then the dragon-blooded, and even at the top of the dragon-blooded, you've got the Shugengen lords, who are all pretty much almost all powerful mages that can wield the law of Yin or the law of Yang. And then obviously they're sanctioned to use that. And then lower down you have stuff like the alchemists, obviously, who aren't sanctioned by like the Jade Dragon, as I kind of hinted at in yesterday's blog. So there's plenty of magic in Cathay and plenty of magic users too.
So are the lores of Yin and Yang kind of like equivalent to the lore of high and dark magic? Like, are they like a weird mix of the lores, or is it something that the Celestial Dragon Emperor figured out like a really long time ago, and he's just been teaching his kids, almost kind of like how the geomancy is to the Slann or something?
So they're so the law of Yang is celestial, kind of high celestial magic, which is kind of mostly associated with the Dragon Emperor himself, and the law of Yin, which kind of has it's kind of a darker undertone, a more subtle undertone, but not evil. That's Kuei Yin's kind of magical law, who's the Moon Empress.
Interesting.
So
Okay.
they're kind of adopted by the Dragon Emperor and the Empress, the law of Yin and the law of Yang. The flagship laws of Cathay, definitely. But even on top of that, you have kind of high magic, and the dragons can use this kind of high magic, which is almost like a pick and mix of different laws, called Fen Shi. So the dragons themselves are masters of all 8 winds of magic and practice Fen Shi sorcery, or high magic, as it is known of the Hyos. The dragon blood wizards, most notably the Shugengen, can practice Feng Shi sorcery as well.
Oh wow! Okay.
And then, yeah, the 8 winds are then divided into Yin and Yang, but then subdivided into their elements on this compass.
Okay, interesting. Wow. Okay, that's super interesting. Nathan, you got one, or you want me to go again?
Yeah, I've got a question, because we've spoken about loads of different enemies and different things moving around there. Older lore, specifically around 4th or 5th edition, suggested a ancient vampiric bloodline which fled to the lands of Cathay. Does that is there a cabal of undead hiding around there?
Sorry. Yes. Yeah. I think it was. Let me just find the entry. Harakat flees from Neferata and Nagash to Cathay, creating the first Jade blood vampires.
So
that's about
sweet.
Jade bloodline confirmed.
Jade bloodline is about. That's all I'm going to say on that matter for now.
That's all we need at this point. Honestly, it's just really nice to see older lore still making it into canon. That is awesome.
What we haven't done quite yet, we kind of picketed and pocketed about the geography of Grand Cathay, and we've picked out a couple of cities. But I think it's worth just having a look at the regions. So you obviously have the northern provinces, which we've kind of mentioned and covered. That's where the Grand Bastion is. It's also home of Weijing, the city. And then you have Imperial Cathay, which is kind of the part just south of Weijing. And that's a effectively ruled by the Dragon Emperor and Dragon Empress. It kind of comes under them. It's a bit like how in Buckingham Palace in London, the immediate area around it, I can't remember, it's the city of Westminster itself is kind of sovereign territory. But then you have Central Cathay, which is like the breadbasket of the empire, and it's where kind of the heartland. It's reasonably safe if you wanted to live in the Warhammer world. Central Cathay may be one of the areas you'd want to live to maximize your lifespan. But even
statement.
Nice.
even then, you know,
Central Cathay is lovely this time of year, I hear.
yes, yeah. But yeah, though even here, danger lurks in forests and wilderness regions. You know, even in the safest place of the Warhammer world, you know, don't go into a wood. You'll probably get eaten. It's also home of the city of Shangwu. It's a major city in the Great River. It lies at the end of the Broken Road where it meets with the Great Road. Taking trade, so it's a big trade area as well. So lots of farming, like say breadbasket, and it's also a conflux where a lot of the great rivers of Cathay meet as well. And the rivers of Cathay are quite important. They're effectively the highways, the super motorways of Grand Cathay, and allow them to kind of move trade and goods and people. You know, not unlike the Empire.
Yeah, very similar to the Empire. Yeah.
Right, and you'll find that in a lot of the more, you know, forward-thinking human nations. Britonia less so, but we all know Britonia.
But the lady.
So, yeah. Full of backwards yokels and superior knights. So, and then obviously to the east, Eastern Cathay, it's actually the wealthiest region in the empire, because numerous grand cities dot its coastline, as well as famous trading points like Fuchao, where we mentioned earlier, that houses a substantial population of high elves and peoples from all across the world. And it's also kind of the home of the dragon fleets that guard against dark elf raiders, other unnamed regions. Western Cathay, we've talked about. Obviously, Shangyang, home of Shangyang, and ruled over by the Iron Dragon. The Tower of Ashir there as well, and the Warpstone Desert. You know, almost this horrible wasteland where, you know, caravans have to use these big mirrored shields to make sure effectively the Warhammer radiation doesn't get to them. So it's interesting actually, because Shangyang is obviously the Spice Road, or the Ivory Road, leads to Shangyang. So that first impression of Cathay to foreigners probably isn't a great one, because you're going through leagues upon leagues of this irradiated wilderness. Maybe seeing the occasional Skaven pop their tail up. And yeah, I think we. Oh yeah, and of course South Cathay as well, which again we've kind of already talked upon. It's like it's people of the forest and wardens, and you know, it's kind of like lots of foothills that lead pretty much into the mountains of heaven, where obviously there are lots of tribes of monkey warriors, some humans, the occasional Tiger Man village, and the Monkey King himself, kind of bit. So,
did you say Tiger Man?
Did I say that? I don't know.
So one thing I actually wanted to ask about, since we kind of mentioned Skaven a couple times here. So there's a lot of lore about how Clan Eshin went to Cathay and learned a lot of their secrets and trades and stuff. Is there any new lore about what happened there? Like, do we know where Clan Eshin's big base is in Cathay, or do we know who taught them? Like, did they make an ally that actually taught them everything, or did they just kind of sneak around the shadows and figure everything out by watching?
I I think that's kind of not really talked about, not mentioned yet. It's not something we have kind of focused on with Games Workshop. We know Clan Eshin are in the Warpstone Desert. We don't know exactly where. I would imagine there's a big Clan Eshin nest somewhere in there. And I don't think we've really covered yet. Again, never say never. We haven't really covered how Clan Eshin kind of came to be. Maybe an area that Black Library authors will investigate at some point, or us ourselves at a later date.
Okay, great.
Okay, cool.
Nathan, you got something?
Just checking through here because most of our stuff has actually been answered already.
While you're doing that, I'll throw out another one. So in one of the articles, the one about Miao Ying, we got a mention from Games Workshop's article about how there's a man who invented the Hongming Skyhulk named Shi Hong, and he's like the master artificer of Nangao. Is he just kind of a random guy, or is he like an important character that we should expect to hear more about and see more? Like, is he like the big master artificer, or is he just one of many?
I think he's the master artificer of Nangao. So he's important. And whether that will be further kind of developed, I don't know. But a lot of these Warhammer characters start off exactly like that. Just names in timelines, or names in a color piece of color text that 2 or 3 iterations down the road they're a major special character. And it's called Dora Jar games design, or Dora Jar world building. It's philosophy I kind of learnt at Games Workshop, kind of really piled on by championed by like Jervis Johnson and Rick and Tumas Purian, some of my contemporaries who I used to work with and under. In that you leave the door slightly ajar on these little details. You just throw a name out there, and all of a sudden it starts to take a life of its own. And it may just be one of those little tidbits that forever stays a tidbit, but there may be some kind of weird gravitational pull towards it, and all of a sudden Shang-Hu or Shang-Yong, I forgot his name, starts to take a life of his own, and at some point he may be a major character.
Awesome.
Interesting. Very interesting.
So he is an actual person of note. Might be something big later. Might just be like something to hear about. But very cool. Very cool.
Has he got a entry in this army book here? No.
Huh?
Not yet. Certainly.
Can you tell us who does have entries?
No.
Oh, damn. I tried. Nathan, you got something?
How much of Cathay's lore by this point would you say is established? Like, I'm talking about like if we go like going around the timeline of the Empire or Bretonia, how far back will we learn about?
Well, I mean, the timeline literally starts at 5900 minus 5900. So, the writers at Games Workshop and Mark Bedford and Andy Hall and Owen have done a really great job of fleshing it out. It is there. It is there. It's like I said at the start, we wanted kind of a fully fleshed out 8th edition faction, and that's what the guys gave us. And we've been able to take that and put it in. Now, is every tidbit here kind of in the game? Probably not.
Yeah, that was expected anyway.
Because we don't just regurgitate the text into a computer game form. I've always tried to put as much of that lore in the game. I've been reasonably successful. Whether it's the unit descriptions, the quotes, and we've had a whale of the time. It's been one of my favourite parts of Warhammer Free to Write is all the different quotes for all these kind of brand new races, and that's where you establish some of these relationships. It's like what does Cathay think about the Empire, for instance? So we can write a quote about that. So that's not necessarily in here.
Yeah.
I can extrapolate out. That's kind of where my experience comes in. Obviously also the diplomacy strings are always a great way of adding that kind of flavour in.
Everybody loves those voice lines.
Yeah.
Well, they do, but then you hear it for the 30th time in a row, and it can get even I've written it. God, Master Mundy's talking again.
One thing I wanted to ask it's about Cathay, but it's a little bit more about kind of the things happening around them. So we've kind of established that Cathay has some notable enemies. I'm sure they've got Beastmen problems, they got Skaven problems, they got Dark Elf problems, they got Warrior problems, Demon problems. But do they have any like particularly famous enemies that have caused them like a lot of grief? Like we know there are a good number of Everchosens who have just never been covered, for instance. Do we have any information on any big bads that have threatened Cathay from the other races, such as a particular demon, or do we have any new Everchosens from the past that are mentioned and stuff like that?
From as far as back as -87, they've had a constant problem with the Dark Elves raiding and taking slaves. And
Yeah.
Dark Elves obviously a slave taking race, so why not go just that way and take from a very bountiful fruit, which is Cathay. So I think certainly the Dark Elves have been a problem. Obviously chaos from the north and insidiously through Qianqi. And the ogres too, another neighbour that they've been kind of at war with at times, to the point that the Celestial Court used the Astromancers to bring down the comet that created the Great Maw. So they're been a constant form in the side. Whether they will be for Warhammer 3, I don't know.
Actually, kind of a follow-up question. Was the Great Maw intentional? Like, obviously they wanted to pull down a meteor, but did they realize that, it's a giant warpstone meteor and it's going to turn into like this horrifying odd thing? Was that on purpose or was that an accident?
I don't want to say, because I think either way has credible. It's not definitive. But the Dragon Emperor and especially the Dragon Empress are gifted with a certain amount of foresight. Again, we don't know why they left in the time of darkness and disharmony, but it must have been for some reason. So they must have a gift of kind of a foresight. Whether they intended to really hurt the ogres, which they did, whether they intended for it to turn into a semi-sentient god mouth, I don't know. My gut would be probably be not. But who knows? It's certainly that's just my personal view, by the way. It's certainly not definitive.
I've heard
whether that was intended action.
I've heard a good fan theory in my community that's made me laugh a lot, that they called down a meteor, but Tzeentch pulled a fast one on them and made sure it was a it was a particularly nasty one.
I think that's a totally justifiable theory. Yeah, that would certainly play into Tzeentch's hands, definitely.
One thing we kind of mentioned them earlier. They were briefly brought up, but one of the when you were looking, if you're looking at like a global map of Cathay, one of the only spots that used to show up very consistently in the lore was the Monastery of the Celestial Dragon Monks. Is there any information about, do they still exist? I think they may have been mentioned earlier, but do they still exist? Are they do they have any kind of like interesting characters or like a Grand Master or something of note that we can hear about?
There are certainly fighting monks in Cathay. Whether you'll see them in this iteration, I don't want to say.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
But yeah, that archetype, kind of an Eastern, benevolent, kind of martial monk that we see in reality and various myths, certainly something that Warhammer plays into or will play into. So yeah. Yes is the answer. Whether they're named exactly that, or whether we've tweaked the name, yeah, that's
Awesome.
probably
awesome. Very exciting. But I'm glad to hear we still have martial artists having at least a prominent spot somewhere.
Yeah.
Because everyone wants to see their their favorite kung fu movie in Warhammer.
Yeah, absolutely.
So a lot of all the lore, and it looks like the current stuff, obviously from what we've seen from the reveal of the trailer and so on, puts Tzeentch as obviously one of the big bads for Cathay constantly. Is there a motive? Because obviously through 8 editions that we've had, and obviously now going into Total War Warhammer 3 with the trailer, it was Cathay versus Tzeentch. It seems that the change of ways is obviously looking at something there.
Yeah, I mean, it's a big area full of souls, isn't it? For the same reason, that they like the yummy Empire souls and Bretonnian souls of the old world. I don't think like there's something underneath Cathay, or I think there's just it's the most populous place on the planet. So of course the Chaos Gods are going to be drawn to that. It's just that this nation is stewarded by dragons, powerful dragons that look upon the gods with disdain. So it's like having that sweetie cupboard when you were young that the parents wouldn't let you in. So of course everyone's drawn to that.
Yeah, it's obviously because if we look at it like elves and Slaanesh wants elven souls. It's like his main chow down.
Yeah.
It's just because obviously because of such a high population, I'd put like, say for example, personally, like Nurgle or Khorne, because war, populace, you could corrupt that. But this then leaves me as to another question. Due to the fact that Tzeentch is there, are the Cathayan Dragons corruptible?
Well, certainly not these 5 as of yet. I mean, there is a question mark over Zaimi. Got his name? The Iron Dragon.
That
Dragon Bro.
Dragon Bro. Yeah. No, I'm not going to start calling that. You guys call him that. The Iron Dragon.
That's not his official terminology.
I know. Yeah, exactly. As soon as I say it, it legitimizes it. No. But I'm not going to rule it out. Now, if Mark Bedford were here, he probably would. But there are 4 missing dragons. Why are they missing?
Yeah, I mean, we've seen Tzeentch do very wondrous things. Like
he got Golrach.
Exactly.
It would be incredibly hard to do. Yeah, and none of the dragons we've talked about here today, certainly the 2 in Warhammer coming, aren't going to be corrupted anytime soon. I think that's very safe to say.
Can you confirm or deny if that gem in Salming's forehead is jade or warpstone?
No. Or is jade warpstone? in the Warhammer world.
Oh man, that would be a horrifying reveal.
Don't do this to me.
That would open up so many worms. One thing we've kind of seen is how Miao Ying is lightning. Like, she's a dragon all about lightning. Lots of lasers going everywhere. Zhao Ming seems to breathe fire as kind of his main thing. Do the other two dragons have like a thematic element to them as well? Or the other three? The other three dragons.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think the clues are often in the names. You've got the sea dragon, the fire dragon, and the jade dragon. So they, as and when they, or if, they appear, those thematic elements will be developed and brought through. I'm not going to just say, oh, it's this and this and this, because obviously, we have artists and concept artists and Games Workshop who
yeah,
be far better than I can at this exact moment.
Awesome.
But know they're there and what they're called, I think, obviously sets the mind racing about those possibilities.
One question I've kind of had buzzing around my community that I wanted to ask before I forget is, so when it comes to Cathay, there was a bit of a mumbling surprise when it was revealed that the Celestial Dragon Emperor and the Moon Empress and all their kids are like super old. Like, they're up there with like the Emperor class dragons, which probably should be a surprise since it's the Celestial Dragon Emperor. But is there any particular like reasoning behind, like, y'all's the authors and the people that were working on it, where y'all wanted to have them be that level of old as opposed to something that came after the Great Cataclysm? Like, what made y'all look at them and go, okay, we gotta have these guys, gotta be old, like super old?
I think that came from, it's just a really interesting take, because there was those lore tidbits. I think most famously in the 6th edition army book that kind of
6th and 7th.
That there was a dragon emperor to the east, and he may even turn into a dragon, and I think even there they hinted that it's just been a different person, or some even suggest it's been the same man all along. Just and so I think where the guys went with that is just really intriguing, and then linking it back to the fact that we know for many editions now, since maybe even 3rd or 4th, that the dragons existed before the old ones. So why not kind of start linking that up a bit? And therefore they have to be old because of that, because we want to kind of link that primordial dragon archetype with the Eastern dragon archetype. It also gives Cathay again a kind of a unique take. They're not governed or ruled by some kind of human superhero character like Cole Franz is, or even the Bretonnian king. So I think it's a really cool take. You've got these humans that aren't ruled by humans, and then you start asking the questions: do they want to be ruled by these dragons? Or is it benevolent? It is benevolent, but are they under that yoke kind of thing, or what do the other races feel about that kind of thing? Do they feel that Cathayans are under a yoke, or do they think they're lucky to be stewarded by dragons that look after them and protect them from chaos and the nasties in the world?
Yeah.
Or have they even stuttered the Cathayans' potential? Who knows?
Oh, that actually reminds me of a question that's I really wanted to ask because it's bugging me. Can you tell us, A, when the Great Bastion was built, and B, how it was built? Like, did the Celestial Dragon Emperor just go out there and just raise it with a ton of magic? Or was it like actually built by humans with magical assistance? Because it seems almost implied that he just kind of like pulled a Mazda Mundi and just ripped that out of the ground.
It was built around minus 1800.
Interesting. Okay.
So about 2,000 years before the Empire, before Sigmar, and again, it's kind of told in a very mythic way. And again, this kind of gives you a hint that how old the dragon children are. You know, that the fire dragon, that every brick was kind of fashioned or forged by Zhao Ming, the Iron Dragon, breathed upon by the fire dragon, and blessed by the emperor, and so in the reality of the Warhammer world, they probably used thousands of their people to build this wall. But obviously, the way it's kind of reiterated in a very mythic fashion within the army book and stuff is like the dragons built it, you know, the dragon children blessed the bricks, etc. But what is kind of indisputable is that it's almost an extension of the Celestial Dragon Emperor himself. And should the Bastion fall, that would probably mark the end of the Celestial Dragon Emperor. The two are linked.
Interesting.
Yeah, that is kind of definite.
Do they still have the lore note about when the Slaanesh caused the big earthquakes that sent the Dwarf Empire? I don't know if it's still on the timeline for Cathay. It's mentioned in one of the timelines in 7th edition. They mentioned that when the Slaanesh messed with everything and it caused the Skaven to blow up their big machine and the Dwarf Empire fell, that there were actually holes ripped in the Great Bastion. Did that still occur? Was that like a particularly nasty incident?
Yeah. The overflow of that was like lots of chaos invaded, and it took them a good few years, and they invaded deep into Cathay. And that took them a good few years to kind of cleanse and rebuild. So that great cataclysm, not the great cataclysm, but yeah, I remember that incident from when I was at secondary school reading about it in the first Skaven army book, and in the dwarf book as well, and the fact that it was all linked, and yeah, that kind of narrative through line has certainly reached this iteration.
And no one ever knew.
I think that's an important note as well, that the Great Bastion does get breached. It does get breached. It's relatively rare, but it does happen. And it's always, Cathay's never been conquered fully. But the Great Bastion has been breached before, and so it's possible in total.
Yeah, I'm sure. I honestly felt like, based on the trailer, that Kairos has probably thrown his weight against Cathay quite a few times.
Yeah, sure. Kairos or many other great demons. There's tales of Bloodthirst is bashing against it.
Yes, the most efficient method.
Yeah. And it's also a great deal of terracotta sentinels are built into the Great Bastion as well.
Can they activate, or are they just kind of there for show?
Oh, they do activate, yeah.
Oh, I love that.
Nice.
That's spicy.
Yes. Yeah. The Great Bastion, the terracotta sentinels, they're not just in the Great Bastion, they're all over Cathay, and they're kind of all, you'll see them almost like in a river, submerged up to their necks, just dormant, and have been for hundreds of years, or standing over paddy fields, or in town centres, just there, and the vast majority of people have just known of this statue just there. And yet when Cathay's under threat, the fire will light within it and it will move. People go, and it will march the wall to protect Cathay.
Very magical security system.
Yeah.
I cannot wait to have showdowns between Tomb King constructs and Cathayan constructs. Like, just see a Necrotect out there yelling at some Cathayan artificer. One of the things I was curious, and I suspect we can't get an answer to this one, but I'll go ahead and ask just in case we can. We know that a lot of the big guys in Cathay are these mythical entities. They're dragons, or the Monkey King, who seems like he's a powerhouse in his own right, especially if he's based on his mythological, in our world, figure. But are there any legendary or notable humans within Cathay? Like, are there any great generals or powerful wizards or crazy warriors of some weird system who are noted, like who are considered extremely important individuals in their own right? Or is Cathay mostly led by kind of mythical creatures?
There are many there are many human heroes. The one that springs to mind is like the guy we've already mentioned in Nangao,
Shi Hong, yeah.
Shi Hong. But there are many other heroes. I mean, and there are not every army in Cathay is led by a dragon. I think we focus on the dragons because they're new and cool.
But there's only 5 of them.
Skews it like Space Marines skew the 40k universe when there's only 1 million Space Marines and billions of things. So seeing a Space Marine is actually super rare. But the vast majority of Cathay's legions and armies are led by great generals, human generals, even if they're dragon-blooded generals or magistrates and human armies. Stuttering a bit here. Have I got some names that I can just throw out at you at the moment? Probably not.
Yeah, that's right. That's fair.
But yeah, those heroes are there. Those great generals. They're just we haven't brought them to the fore yet, but there's plenty of time.
I'm hoping for a kung fu master. that's my hope right now.
It's definitely him. Yeah.
And I think the other question that I have on my mind at the gosh darn it, I just lost it. Nathan, ask a question. I just lost what I was going to ask.
Put me on the spot like this.
It's your turn. Do something.
Well, honestly, you've been answering pretty much everything that's been on our original list when it comes to these types of things.
I know he's destroying us. He's destroying us.
Like at the beginning, he knocked out
a stuttering mess. So I hope concoct something out of it.
Actually, I've got another question. So we know there are astromancers, which seem to be vaguely Lord Heaven's guys, and we know there are alchemists, which seem to be the lore of metal. Are there any other notable wizard types that are known to show up in Cathay? And on top of that, as a part 2, could you explain why astromancy is considered okay by the Jade Dragon, but alchemy isn't?
Yeah. So you have the Shujengan, which are obviously the higher echelon of dragon-blooded wizards who practice laws of yin and yang. And then you have the Astromancers, which obviously the Celestial Dragon Emperor sanctions. They're sanctioned. And other wizards and magic users are for probably the same reasons that the Empire's witch hunters are not sanctioned. That's an easy way for Qianqi to kind of gain purchase within Cathay.
I see. That makes sense.
Now, the alchemists aren't sanctioned by the Jade Dragon, and he's the guy that issues the edicts and statutes of Cathay. He's the guy that manages this great wheel of bureaucracy. Now, the Iron Dragon, as we know, is a bit of a, rules. He didn't give a.
He likes to give the double, the double fingers. Yeah.
He's you issue him an edict, he'll look at it, you know. So he's created this conclave called the House of Secrets, which is where these kind of cabals of kind of fire alchemists and metal alchemists kind of gather, and these are the guys that have this lust for knowledge and know that within the Warpstone Desert is like I think I mentioned, like in the blog, they'll go on these expeditions, probably all suited up, etc.
Gotta make that philosopher's stone or whatever it is they're chasing.
Exactly. So they don't get contaminated by the desert, because it really is a horrible wasteland out there. And they'll bring back these elements and stuff, those that don't get picked off by rival war bands or Clan Eshin. And so the Iron Dragons fostered that kind of acceptable behavior, and so that's why it drags these kind of unsanctioned wizards to him. And if he wasn't a dragon, he wouldn't have got away with it, but because he is a dragon, and probably because the Moon Empress kind of looks over him.
I was about to ask.
Yeah, he's mommy's favorite. He's a mama's boy.
The House of Secrets obviously harkens back to what you said earlier about the Moon Empress. So she is fully aware. Are the rest of them completely aware of, like, say, for example, all his doings?
I mean, maybe. I have a brother that lives near Scotland. Am I vaguely aware of what he gets up to on a daily basis? No. Do I generally know what he's up to?
Zhao Ming almost seems like the kind of guy that when he gets together with his siblings, he like deliberately brings up stuff that he's not supposed to be doing just to piss everybody off.
He totally would. Just to,
just especially Jade. I know it says that him and Miao Ying are very polar opposites and don't get along, but I imagine Zhao Ming gets way too much pleasure out of torturing the Jade Dragon.
Yeah. Absolutely. Now, just to contextualize, not getting on doesn't mean they're always at each other's throats, and they will unite, because I kind of mentioned earlier, for the benefit of Grand Cathay and stuff. So you see them together and wonder why they're not ripping each other's eyes out. It's because, well, just like real family, when you get together, you're not instantly going to fight, but you may share a meal or something, or talk to each other, even if you're there to just
yeah. So something that you mentioned earlier that I actually just thought to ask about real quick is we kind of mentioned that there is a form of religion in Cathay, which is the ancestor worship. Does that have any sort? Are there any kind of like priests, or is there like a formal cult that oversees that, or is it more of just kind of a personal thing and there's no overseers of that experience?
Yeah, I think it's very much the latter.
Okay. So there's no like warrior priests or any of that kind of stuff.
No. There's no kind of grand temple of ancestor worship in Beijing and stuff. Like I say, worship of gods is not something that's encouraged in Cathay. The dragons are revered by dint of protecting the humans, and that's all they've been known.
I think they've got the right of it. Warhammer gods are a mess. They're a motley crew. Awesome. This is all just super exciting and really fun information to get. I think honestly, I'm kind of out of stuff.
Yeah. Same.
I think that's probably a good place to kind of wind people up. If people are still watching, God bless you.
Oh, I'm sure they are.
And yeah, I think that well is getting dry. So, but even then, I'm only touching the surface of what's what's there, and we've still got so much to show you.
I got one last serious question about Warhammer Fantasy lore. Okay, this is really important to me. Okay, fish people, are they real?
Are they real? Well, there's been rumours of needle-fanged monstrosities jumping aboard ships deep in the Great Ocean.
All right, you heard it here, folks. Confirmed. Full confirmed.
I'm just saying there's been rumours and myths about it.
Ever since I saw Ineth Deepkin, I'm like, it's so close to what I want. It's so close. Well, Andy, thank you so much for coming on the podcast to chat with us. This has been an absolute privilege for both of us, and I'm sure for everybody listening. This to say this was a treat. There's no words for
it. Thanks very much, guys. It is good to talk about this stuff because I've been, keeping it secret for so long. So
I don't know how you do it. I don't.
Just to get, just vomit lore at people. Fully sanctioned as well. Good to be able to do that. So yeah, it's been a pleasure. And like I say, I hope I haven't bored anyone, and thank everyone that's still watching this. I'm sure there's 3 of you.
Hey, we're actually doing pretty well in some countries. We just got some really nice stats back.
Yeah. We could actually show off a little bit.
We're number 1 in Austria and I forget what the other one is. I'm so sorry. Whoever it is, I forgot.
Well, I'm sure when it's just you two, it's brilliant. It's just when you drag this absolute ugly mush onto your screen.
Says the most attractive face in the room.
Yeah. You've been able to bring a lot of good knowledge to a lot of people, because I know a lot of the viewers who watch myself and Sotek through our normal content too. A lot of them are old guard. They're Warhammer Fantasy fans. So this to them is something they've wanted to know for decades. So this is incredible. Like, I have been sat here listening to you with a big smile on my face. Like, this has been really cool.
And it can't be understated. I just want to make sure I say this to where you can hear it, of that I've had the pleasure to talk to so many people from like China or Southeast Asia or that part of the world that are so beyond excited to have like representation of their cultures and stuff appearing in the Warhammer universe. And it's such a blessing that y'all were able to do this, or that y'all decided to do this for us and bring out like something truly fantastic and resurrect the Warhammer fantasy world in a way that we never thought would be possible. So really, really thank you and all the people you've been working with for that.
No, it's been a pleasure, and it is really good to hear it's gone down well on that side of the world. We want them to be happy and feel that just like I do when I play the Empire, that there's something for them, not exclusive to them, because I've been playing Cathay and I bloody love it.
Oh yeah, I'm all Miao Ying first playthrough. Unless they wheel out Kugoth, that's the only person that might challenge that throne. But right now, Miao Ying, all in.
It's great for them to be on board. Can't wait to, after 2 hours of me talking, to actually show the game in its splendor.
So excited.
It's coming. So don't worry about that.
Really excited.
Yeah, we don't know exactly when this is going to release, but hopefully when it does, everyone will really, really enjoy this. Nathan, any closing thoughts?
No, as well, thank you for being a guest, and to all our listeners, I hope you've learned a lot. Especially all the old guard that I know like comment on my videos and so on. I really hope that you got what you wanted to hear, because this is incredible. This Cathay is drawing ever closer. Insane.
Mr. Andy Hall, any last thoughts for us as we're heading out?
No, I can't wait to show you all of Warhammer 3. It's the best game I've ever done, or we've ever done as well. There's been so many people working on this game.
Actually, last little thing, can we expect any little like short stories from you, like we had with the Vampire Coast and some of the other things? Maybe,
He's
please. Just little. They can be
he's
short.
smiling.
I may have been asked to do something.
I'm so excited.
Watch this space.
All right, that's gonna be it for us. Before we start asking more questions, get in trouble. So
Yeah.
we're gonna go ahead and get out of here. Thank you all so much for watching, and we'll see you guys next time. Thanks. Bye.